Welcome to the Courageous Recovery broadcast. I'm your host, Randy Mortensen. This is a weekly 20 to 25 minute program where we provide answers for your I don't know how. Whether you're dealing with recovery issues, maybe emotions from a loss, or life has just thrown you one more curveball than you were expecting, it's so glad to have you here today and to listen to this awesome interview. It's a huge blessing for me to have Shannon Monet on from the great state of Michigan with me. She's got a powerful, powerful story and just the tenacity that she has. I know you're just going to love it. And it's great to see people signing on from coast to coast and literally around the globe. I think we're up to 24 or 25 countries with listeners now. And I just want to say thank you for taking time from your busy schedules to connect. You should see a chat box or a subscribe button. If there's a place for you to leave comments, please leave a comment with any thoughts. We hugely value those comments. And if there is a subscribe button, please take 30 seconds and hit subscribe. For more information about me and what God has me doing these days, you can go to randymortensen.com. That's Randy, MORTENSEN.com. There you will see a 21-point assessment. That's a tool to determine whether you or a loved one is struggling from with a substance abuse disorder or some sort of compulsive destructive behavior. And it will determine whether you're a mild, moderate, or severe case of that battle, basically. So without further ado, welcome to the Courageous Recovery Podcast, Shannon.
Thank you for having me, Mr. Randy.
Well, and we were chuckling before we signed in that my usual first question is what is it that you know today that you wish your 22-year-old self would have known? But you're 7 years from that. So let's change this up a little bit. So as a sophomore in high school, as a 15-year-old, that you've got the maturity of a 28-year-old, I would say. But what is there that you know today that you really wish your 12-year-old self would have known? What comes to mind?
Well, I wish I would have known that I had purpose and that I was actually important. And also, I just wish I would have known that all the things that I went through is to get me to this place that I am now.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've been through some battles. There's no question about that.
Yes.
So where should we go back to? I mean, I love the fact that today you're that world changer. You're that light to the world, to that person who's just struggling with some mental health challenges. You speak about suicide awareness and you know the great thing is that you can truly say to that young guy or young gal, I know how you feel, right?
Yes.
Here's what I was battling with. So what is it that in 2022 that you're seeing amongst your friends that are kind of amplified, as we're supposedly coming out of this pandemic that you can relate to? What comes to mind?
Well, I'm seeing a lot of people struggling with knowing their identity and just following what everyone else is doing in the world. So it's really an identity crisis. And there's a bunch of teens who are following what everyone else is doing. And it can be hard sometimes because you're seeing somebody do this and you're like, okay, well, I want to do it too as well. So that's what I'm also seeing. And then it's just so many things like depression and suicidal thoughts that is running rapidly in this generation.
Yeah. And so if as people hear your story, I want to go back to that time where you just felt you didn't fit in, and then you got to the point where you thought people were your friends, but they were really not your friends. They were more, treating you poorly than anything else, right? So
Yes.
how far should we go back here? Do you want to go back to fifth grade, sixth grade? Where do those dark memories really kind of start? And what was your aha moment?
It was definitely fourth and fifth grade, because which later made me create the video The Outcast, because I moved to the school and the school I entered, it wasn't very welcoming. And I felt so unwelcome because I didn't feel any love there. And I grew up surrounded by love, by my family members and my church family, who has always surrounded me by love. But in this new school, the atmosphere was not very loving. And I was the only Black kid in my classroom. And then also, I was the new kid. So the more they got to know me, the more they paid attention to my differences. And they pointed out every imperfection in me. And when I was younger, I used to carry so much confidence and I was very bold in the light that I carried inside of me and the creativity I had. And even my style, I loved myself. But this new school ended up changing the way that I viewed myself, where in that moment, my light dimmed and my confidence and my boldness really faded away. And when people really said those negative things to me, it made me feel like I was a flower where they just kept plucking me and picking off every petal until I had no value. And I felt like there was no more life to me. And even as time passed, every look, every word, and the loneliness, and then the depression weighed heavier and heavier on me. And I was tired of being mentally bullied every single day. And although I was just 9 years old at the time, I felt these heavy emotions. And as a result, I really didn't know what to do about it. So I went to music. I mean, I could have went to my parents, but instead I just went to other outlets to help me out. So I went to music. I went to depressing artists, thinking that it would cancel out the loneliness and the depression, but it was really only temporary. And I also watched everyone else with their friends, and I was alone and I was just separated from everyone else. And I was different. And I really did not like myself for that. And it was one time at school where they had like lunch helpers where you help the teachers at lunch. And I decided to do that so I wouldn't have to sit at lunch alone. But the times I really couldn't do that, I used to just talk to God because He was really all I had. And during the times when I talked to Him, I went in my own world where it felt like it was just me and Him. And some days I didn't even speak. Sometimes I just cried and imagined He was walking with me. And it was an everyday thing. And I wasn't even sure if God could really hear me or not, but I still spoke and it was still a part of me that believed. But fast forward to July 18th, I was 11 years old at the time, and I wanted my life to end that day. I was hanging on a thin piece of thread because I was tired of feeling worthless and feeling alone. And I was tired of the constant replays of what they said playing in my mind. And the voices in my head were getting louder and louder. And I just couldn't turn it down. And I ended up crying, but not too loud where my parents couldn't hear me in the other room. And I ended up hearing footsteps. And it was my mom coming in the room. So I dried my tears, made sure she didn't see that I was crying. But she ended up coming in my bedroom and she ended up praying for me.
Wow.
And she did not know anything I was going through. She didn't know the suicidal thoughts. She didn't know about any of that because I did a great way of hiding it. But anyway, she was praying for me. I knew it was nothing but a godsend. She was open to hear God. And as she was praying for me, God showed her a vision of me sitting alone at the lunch table. And I was really speechless because I'm like, okay, I never told her about this. And I know it's nothing but God. So at that moment, it really showed me like, okay, He sees me through what I'm going through. So He's really
That's
amazing.
amazing. Thank
Yes.
you. Thank you for doing such an eloquent job of sharing. And there's a couple of questions that come to my mind. What what could be said to that teacher or to those teachers in a school? And I don't want to name any particular schools or
Right.
anything, but what would you say today to those teachers that have that 9 year old young girl, young boy that they maybe don't look the same as other schoolmates? What would you say to not criticize but to encourage and to give a little bit of nudge to those teachers? What could they be doing different, do you think?
Well, I would just tell them to also just keep their eyes open, just really watch like every student and see, just be mindful of what's going on in the classroom because my teachers, like, they weren't really focused on that. They really didn't. see what I was going through. It was ignored. So what I really suggest is just being mindful and staying open to be like, okay, I'm seeing this student go through this, so maybe I should talk to them, and then talk to the students who are bullying them and showing them, okay, that's not the way. Just being there for your students as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and that those are good words, and I know that our teachers today are overworked and underpaid.
Yes.
I totally get that, and the last couple of years there's been so much additional stress put on to the leaders in the classrooms, but that that doesn't offer an excuse for why they weren't, why he or she wasn't doing something, because now, there's a possibility that
Mhm.
you were doing a pretty good job of hiding it,
I did. I did.
right?
Yes, I did.
so, I haven't known you for very long, but it would that would be one potential where the student may not be
Show it. Yeah.
verbalizing,
Right.
right? Okay, this is how I feel, and so on and so forth. But that's not a criticism; it's simply an observation, right?
Yes.
And and I've seen it. I mean, I grew up in rural Minnesota, and I remember even in those small towns how there were, dads that were at a local Air Force base, so their kids were coming to our schools, and there were Native Americans that were in our schools, and they were poorly treated. I remember that to this day, making it made me sick to my stomach,
Yeah.
to think back on those times. And, you know, here in 2022, you would hope that some of those things are better, but I don't really think they are they?
No.
Okay, okay, okay. So let's shift the thought here for a minute. What about, and again, it appears that you were doing a pretty good job of hiding it from mom,
I
right?
was. Yes.
So what would you say to those parents that, maybe have a son or daughter that they don't know whether they're struggling with fitting in or being bullied or whatever? What words of encouragement or guidance, in intelligence, would what could the parents be looking for, I guess? Let's start with that.
Like signs.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. Well, usually different it can be different with every child, because
sure.
some children could be joking around like about like wanting to end my life, or it'll be better if I wasn't here. They can say different, make different comments like that. But also you can just try to look at how they're acting, because that's a way also, and just being open, like, okay, let me see what's going on with this child. And also, if you can't find out, I suggest just trying to talk to them and having face-to-face conversations, like, okay, well, if you're ever going through anything, you can talk to me. Just leaving that open doorway to talk with your children. And also just being open to listen, instead of like just being open to listen instead of quick to speak. You know what I mean? Just listening to what they have to tell you.
Yeah, and even, do you think if there are siblings, do you think the siblings would be picking up on some of these things that maybe a mom or a dad wouldn't? Do you think
Yes.
if there was a brother or sister there, they would know some of what was going on? Do you think is that a possibility too?
Yeah, siblings could also tell as well, because sometimes, you can be close to your sibling and then not as close with your parents. So you're like, you talk to them about everything. So I think also just having that open conversations with your siblings as well is something that also helps.
Okay, I thought so, but I wanted to hear you say it,
Yeah, you're right.
because there. I mean, I remember there were three kids in a family, and two of them, one boy and one girl, they were just doing well, but they had a middle brother that just never fit in. His attitude was horrible, and and he would get picked on by other people because of, some of those shortcomings. And so siblings, okay, that those are great words of wisdom, for sure. And
Thank you.
we need to be praying more for our teachers too,
Yes, for sure.
right? Because
Yes.
you've got all these battles going on. Okay, so what here in a couple minutes we'll talk about how people can reach out to you and find your information. But here's another question for you. So God's restored you. God's brought new vision, new purpose to your life. It sounds like.
Yes, he did.
How what's your life look like over the next 4 to 5 years?
Well,
What
I
do you
see
think?
myself speaking and then singing in front of people. I just want to go around the globe and travel around the globe just to speak to different teenagers, even adults. And that's my dream, really just to do whatever God has called me to do too as well. Whatever he leads me to, I'm gonna go there. And I'm excited.
Way to go! Way to go! And the video, the Outcast. Let's talk
Yes.
more about that for a minute.
Well, God has placed in my heart a year ago. I mean, almost a year ago, probably like, yeah, a year ago. He placed on my heart to create the outcast. And I'm like, okay, well, God, I don't want to do it. I don't want to share my story. I'm going to keep it to myself. And I'm too young anyway. But I really felt like a pulling on my heart. Like, no, you're not too young. Go and make that video. Go do it. And I still held back a little bit. And it took me like a good 3 months to finally step out and do it. So I'm like, okay, I'll make the outcast. I'll do it. And I made it, and look where it got me now. So I really had to be obedient.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Well, like what I say to people in recovery is first we have to be willing, right?
Yes,
And
willing.
then we have to
Yes.
be obedient. For
Yes,
sure. For sure. But yeah, you're the word obedient is one of the real challenges,
it is.
right? No matter
Yes.
how strong our faith is, it's that stumbling block. Okay, so let's talk for a couple of minutes. ShannonMonet.com is a
Yes.
good place for people to find you. So that's ShannonMonet.com, and that will
Yes.
be in any of the show notes. So you can go there. And then on Facebook, you want to talk about how they can get a hold of you on Facebook or on Twitter or LinkedIn. You want to give that and Instagram. You want to
Okay.
just talk
Yes.
about that?
They can reach me at Shannon Monet underscore and on Instagram, and then also on Twitter, still Shannon Monet underscore. But on Facebook, it's Shannon Monet page. And then I do have a TikTok now, and it's also Shannon Monet underscore. So
Of
yeah.
course, you have a TikTok.
Yes, I do.
Us old gray hair guys, we're not quite to TikTok yet. That's not true. I've been on there a couple of times, I guess, but yeah, yeah. I love that you're on there, and so on your website, then there's ways to get information on booking you to come and speak
Yes.
and so on and so forth. Okay, and so you want to travel the world. Interesting.
Yes, I do.
And how much have you traveled thus far?
I haven't traveled yet. I've been doing Zoom calls mainly, but I haven't traveled yet. But I'm excited to when God opens that doorway for me.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. Awesome. Yes, folks. So all of the contact information for Sharon will be available in the share notes. And I just want to share a couple of things on programs that I have. You've heard me talk about the Lifestyle Champion cohort. There is another version of that starting in March, and those are 90-minute weekly meetings where we really cover three phases of growth in your life. And number one is evaluate, number two is equip, and number three is enjoy. Those are the three phases of the Lifestyle Champion cohort. For more information, you can just text champion to 66866. That's champion to 66866. I do want to mention also there is a Lifestyle Champion weekend retreat for men coming up the first weekend in April, and you can actually go to lifestylechampion.org to get more information about that. And there's just a ton of real positive things going on in the recovery world these days. As much as we see and hear about people struggling, it's great to know that there are a growing number of resources that are available both in the faith-based world as well as in your non-faith based. And for some of the network information, you can either go to my website or you can actually reach out to my office, which is 321 757 HOPE. That's 321 757 HOPE. So enough about me. Shannon, what are you hearing from other young ladies that are maybe 14, 15 years old? What is there that's just breaking their heart these days? What is there that's causing undue pressure for them just in life? What comes to mind?
Well, people who I've came across with, even on social media, who's reached out to me, they just tell me different things. Like even at school, they struggle with the same thing that I struggled with, wanting to fit in. So they also struggle with that. But then also, it may just be issues at home, or it can be social media that's affecting them, like watching everyone else and they're affected by it. So it's many issues like that.
Yeah, and do you think do you think that changes for a 13-year-old versus a 16-year-old? Do you think those things change, or are they all mostly the same?
Kind of the same, mostly the same.
Yeah,
It
I
doesn't,
figured.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
the same.
I figured you would say that, but I wasn't sure. And and when so adult people over 30 do this, where their social media following or somebody's negative comments, or there's not a lot of praise happening on social media for the most part,
Right,
right?
right.
So that criticism on social media, do you think it's as detrimental as being bullied in a classroom? How do
Yes,
those measure up? Do you?
it has that
Wow.
same effect to me. It's pretty equal. It has that same exact effect because the words are like has that same amount of power. Because if you're
Yeah.
constantly hearing something, you're like, okay, I start to feel it, and I'm like, okay, this actually does hurt. Even if you're in person or even online, it has that same effect. It's basically cyberbullying.
Yeah. Wow.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. And so when you're when you have an opportunity to just share what God's done in your life, what what were one or two of those times, the suicidal thoughts, I get that. What were what were one or two of those times, and you already shared about the vision that you were given when your mom was praying for you. What comes to your mind? What are two or three praise reports that come to your mind, thinking, okay, this is how God just really showed up in a positive way? And then what's one or two things where you were in a situation where it was kind of like, really, God, why me? What are some thoughts that come to mind on both sides of that equation?
Well, it was one time where I just really wanted to give up. Well, not life, but with what I'm doing now with podcasting and doing social media posts and everything, because I was getting tired and I'm like, I'm ready to quit. I'm ready to give up. But it was like, no, you have to keep going for the people. It's for the glory of God and it's to get people set free. And I'm like, but I really don't want to do it. I am tired. But it's like, no, you have to go forth and do it. So it really took a lot of prayers to get me through to do this now because I'm like, okay, I'm actually getting tired and I'm ready to quit. But it's like, no, it's not really about me anymore. It's about the people that can be touched.
Wow.
Forget me. It's about them, not for me.
Right.
So that's
Yeah.
one of them. Yes.
Yeah, what and just the praise and the success. What's a story that comes to mind there with, let's say, with a third party, because you've interacted with someone? What comes to mind? Just a praise report.
Well, it was one girl who I came across on social media. I didn't even know I followed her at one point. And she just posted something regular. She was, I don't even know what she was doing at the time, but she was just posted something. And I really felt a strong pulling on my heart, like text her and ask her, are you okay? And I'm like, I don't even know her. She's a stranger, but I'm going to go do it anyway. All right, I'll listen. So I end up texting her and I'm like, are you okay? And I'm a stranger. And she ended up responding. She's like, how'd you know I wasn't okay? No, I'm not okay. I was about to end my life. She literally was
Wow.
about to contemplate, she's about to commit suicide. And I'm like, what? I'm like, God
Wow.
told me to talk to you. She's like, what? He did? And she was like, how did you know? I'm like, I listened to God. She was about to end her life. So I was like,
Wow.
wow, that's why you really have to be obedient. Because what if I skipped over and I'm like, no, I'm not going to do it. She's a stranger. I'm not going to do that. But I'm like, no, I got to go forth and do it. So she given her life to
That,
God, and now she's freed from suicidal thoughts. Yeah.
wow. Way to go. That's a remark. I'm so glad you shared
Yes.
that, because it's in those darkest moments, right? When we're
Yes.
tired, when you think, really, one more interview, really,
Yes.
one more person that I need to, show how much I love them, but then to have that sort of a reward, right?
Yes.
And so fulfilling. Well done. That's
Thank
that's
you.
such a great thing. And so let's talk about mom for a minute,
Okay.
okay? And I don't know, are mom and dad in same house, or mom?
It's mainly mom right now. Yes, mom.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, that's why I asked the way I did, because
Yes.
I didn't want mom to be the only one we talked about, but mom's
Yeah.
going to be the only one we talk about right now for sure. So, what if we had mom on with the microphone? What
Okay.
would mom say that she's noticed most about Shannon in the last 3 to 4 years? What do you think she would say?
She probably would see my growth and how much I changed. And she's always been a huge support for me. She's always
That
been by my side.
that's awesome.
Yes.
Well done, mom. Well
Yes,
done.
she's the best.
Yeah, yeah. And what sort of upbringing did she have? Was she in a great family when she was being raised
Yes.
also?
Yes, she
So
was.
she, so she probably had a great mom also, right?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And so that's why it's so important for us, at the older we get, it's so important for us to just pour into the younger generations,
It is very important.
because you're the future,
Yes,
right?
we are. It's needed. It's
Yeah,
needed.
yeah.
Yes.
Okay, let's do one more question, and then we should start to wrap up.
Okay.
What can we do as a community, as a faith-based community? Let's just say that.
Okay.
What can we do to reduce and offset and limit all of the pornography and all the poor misguided thoughts that are happening on social media day in and day out to other young men and young women your age? What comes to mind? What can we do as parents or grandparents or whatever to negate some of the negative stuff that's being done on social media today? What comes to mind?
Well, I believe we should just be open to hear God as well, and just being a light. Like even when you're on social media, just be a light. And I'm not saying like force everything on them, because did Jesus do that? Did he force people? No, he showed love with them and he communed with them. So we have
Right.
to do the same thing, and we have to show love to them, even though we can't judge them like you're doing this and you're doing that. No, we have to love them and help them out of that pornography and out of things that are just like out of depression, out of suicidal thoughts. We have to help them out of that with love. And it's the
Yeah.
care. And even as a parent, just being open to hearing God as well. Like, how do I help this child that I have right here? Or a grandparent? How do I help my grandchildren?
Good words. Good words.
Yes.
You're right. It's how do we draw them closer to us
Yes.
so they want what we have, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. No, those are good words. Those are good words. Okay. Well, sadly, folks, the overdose deaths here in the United States have tripled since 1990. Right now in the United States, we're seeing more than 150 overdose deaths per day. It's costing our economy somewhere between 800 and 900 billion dollars annually. So if you're looking for more information about the great work that Shannon's doing, or some of the projects that I'm working on, please reach out to us. And as I mentioned earlier, Shannon's contact info will be shared in the show notes. And I do hope that you found this information helpful today. You can look for the replay of this to be available on usual podcast online outlets like Buzzsprout, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and many, many more. And so, Shannon, in closing, what words of encouragement would you offer for that for that 15, 16-year-old young lady that's saying, wow, life sucks today? What would you say to her?
Well, perhaps you're thinking, I'm a failure, I'm a burden, no one needs me, and there is no point of living. But those are not your thoughts. It's just the enemy masking as your thoughts. And he uses depression to steal your spiritual power and freedom and to fill your mind with darkness where you no longer can see the light anymore. He steals, he kills, he destroys, and it's a spiritual purpose that you have inside. It's a very important purpose that you have inside of you. And he uses tactics, those tactics, the thoughts that come to your mind and different things like that. He uses those tactics to try to get you out of here because you have a great purpose and you have worth. And he may have used people to get to you and even yourself. But many beat themselves up and isolate themselves, putting themselves in that battle alone. But in Ecclesiastes, it says, a person standing alone can be attacked and defeated, but two can stand back to back and conquer, and three are even better, for a triple braided cord is not easily broken. Well, it's the same for you. You can't stay alone and you can't stay separated. Go out to somebody, get help, because it's needed. And if you're alone, the louder the voices get, the more you get attacked because you leave yourself out there vulnerable. But if you give it to God, he will work with you and he will change it for your good. All the bad things that happen to you, he'll switch it around for your good. And you've been fighting too long on your own. It's time to give it to God.
Wow. Amen. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Well, folks, have a blessed day and be extraordinary today.